Today I'm going to show you my approach to trimming the bottom of a door, ready for new carpets going in. Hiya folks, welcome back to the show. As I say, today I'm going to show you my approach to trimming a door ready for brand new carpets going in. As per usual, there's a number of different ways of doing this, but this is my approach and it tends to work pretty well. The door is already all hung and fit. It is catching a little bit on that top corner. So while I'm doing the bottom, I'm going to trim a tiny little bit off the top there just to stop it from catching. It's literally only 1 millimeter or something. So we'll do that at the same time. But the main thing we're going to have to do is trim a little bit off the bottom, because once the carpet and underlays in and whatnot, it's going to end up hitting the carpet. So let me show you how I go about doing that. So before I take the current door off its hinges, I need a reference point so I know how high this door is off the floor, and that way we'll be able to work out how much we need to trim off without having to rehang this door, because we're going to take this door off while the carpets go in, because it makes life easier for the carpet fitter. But then I don't want to be hanging it and taking it off its hinges a million times in order to get the bottom gap correct. So if we do it this method, we shouldn't need to do that. So I'm just going to add a tiny little pencil mark at the bottom of the door frame itself, on the door frame, in line with where the current bottom of the door is. Exactly there. Just a little mark, but we are going to have to refer to that afterwards. And I'm going to do the same on the other side as well. So I've actually made the mark a little bit bigger than I would normally make it, just so that you can actually make it out on the video. But that is perfectly in line with the bottom of the door as it is at the minute. And same on the right hand side as well. Once we've done that, we can whip the door off its hinges. My approach generally to taking a door off is to take all the screws out bar one at the very bottom and one at the very top, and then I'll take the very bottom one out. I'll just put these screws to one side. Just be careful that the door doesn't trap your fingers, and then I'll carefully take the top one out. Just try to make sure the hinge doesn't damage the rebate. Sometimes the rebate will hold the door for you, but don't rely on it. There we go. What I'm also going to do, just as a little reminder, that I need to shave a little bit off this top edge. Where's my pencil gone? As I say, it's only like 1 millimeter or something. Needs to come off that top corner. So I'm going to do this down in the workshop because the carpet fitters are coming in and I want to keep out the road. Obviously you can do it in the room if you prefer, whatever. Oh, deceptively heavy door this. So I can't do anything now until the new carpets are in, so we'll wait for the carpet fitters to do their thing. We'll come back and I'll show you the next bit. So carpets are all in, and what I've now got is a nice clean steel ruler here. You can use anything flat really. And I'm just resting this on top of the carpet that the door is going to be rubbing up against. So the door's obviously going to be opening this way. So this is the side of the carpet that we're going to be measuring the height of, not this side. I mean, it should be the same, but on the off chance that you're in a room with two different carpets. So all I'm going to do is slide this up to the edge of the door, and I'm going to put another tiny little mark on the door. This is going to be very, very faint because we don't want anyone to see that. So hopefully you can see what's going on here. So we've got the mark that we put on the frame originally, which is buried kind of in the carpet. You can barely see it, but it's right at the bottom there. And we've got the new mark that we've just added. So all we need to do is measure the distance between that old mark and the new mark. So looking at that, we are looking at 18 millimeters that needs to come off the bottom of the door. And what I'll do, just to double check, it should be the same that we're trimming off both sides, because this is a pretty level doorway and the floors are level. But I'm just going to check the other side of the door as well in exactly the same way. So just sliding the ruler over and little mark. Yeah, 18 millimeters, it looks like. So 18 millimeters is our measurement. So there's a number of ways you can trim a door, and obviously we're trimming off the bottom of the door here. One thing I strongly recommend before you do any trimming, check if you've got any room at the top of the door, because it might just be a case that you need to adjust the hinges and bring the door up a little bit. But on this door, I know I've got no room to move the door up. I'm going to have to trim something off the bottom, and as I say, it's 18mm that's going to be coming off. So I'm just going to mark the 18mm on both sides. And I'm going to be using a track saw for this cut. You can use any type of saw you want. This is way too much to take off with a plane. You can of course use a hand saw, but why use a hand saw when you've got a track saw? We'll set the depth first of all, so we know we're just going to cut all the way through. Line it up on our marks. And then we'll just sand the edge very slightly. Do always check what the maximum is that you're allowed to cut off your door. It obviously depends on the type of door that you've got. If it's a solid wood door, you can generally take as much as you want off, but check with the manufacturer's instructions of the door if possible. We'll give this a test fit, see what it's like. Right, we'll just go for a quick test hanging of the door. I've only got one screw in the bottom, one screw in the top at the minute, just to test it. I know I still need to trim a little bit off the top corner, so that's fine. Height-wise, it's just kissing the carpet, which is perfect. If anything, I think what I'd like to do is just take another millimetre off. I mean, that's pretty close to perfect, but I need to take it off anyway. I'll explain why in a minute. So I might as well take another millimetre off the bottom, trim that little bit on the top, and then we're on to the next little stage. Just a quick bit of primer, obviously, on the bits that we've cut. I'm going to do this now because I'd rather do the painting before it goes in the room with the brand new carpets, but obviously that's sometimes unavoidable. And then same on the bottom. Obviously you can't do this once the door's fitted, and really you want to make sure, if at all possible, that you do paint the bottom of the door, because it stops moisture getting absorbed by the door. The only downside is that you don't want to be fitting a door with wet paint into a room with brand new carpets. So we're going to leave this overnight to dry. Sometimes it's just simply not an option to paint the bottom, but I would strongly recommend painting the bottom. This is just an acrylic primer undercoat that I'm using, and it's enough just to seal the wood. Right, we'll give that overnight to dry and we'll get it finally fitted into the frame. Now, on the basis that you've probably got brand new carpets, it's a good idea to put down something to protect the carpet, and I also like to use a little wedge or a pry bar or something like that, just to take the weight off the door a little bit and just to force the door upwards and into its hinge rebate properly. and that is pretty much perfect, really. It's just kissing the carpet over here, but it's not enough to cause any damage, so I'm not too concerned about that. I would rather that it's just brushing past than we'll have like a massive gap at the bottom. So this is quite a thick carpet anyway, so over time that pile will flatten to the point that this won't even touch the carpet anymore. It's just because the carpet's literally brand new. So that's us done. Happy with that. A carpet in an ensuite, whatever next? YouTube's gonna go crazy. More about that in a future video, but for now I just wanted to give you a few little tips that might help you if you're ever doing a project like this. It's not exactly a project. First of all, I'm using a Freud blade on my track saw with quite a high tooth count. It's quite a thin curved blade as well, and I know that this gives a very clean cut. I would always suggest that you get used to the blade and saw that you've got. Do a few test cuts first, just to see what sort of problems that you might run into. I know that I can trust going all the way through the door in one pass with this blade, and it won't splinter on either side, but do always test that first. One of the problems that I did run into with this blade is because it's got a slightly thinner kerf on it, the riving knife tends to get jammed, and the riving knife is that like metal bit at the back, and when it gets jammed it's actually really dangerous. So one thing I've ended up doing is just putting a bit of tape over the riving knife to stop it coming down, and that kind of resolves that problem. I'd love to know what the official solution to this is. As far as I'm aware, on newer models of the TS55 they've taken the riving knife off. I've never ever had a problem with kickback on this saw. The most dangerous thing that I've found is that the riving knife sometimes gets jammed, which is a pain in the neck. Obviously, I don't recommend using any tool outside the parameters of whatever's in the instruction manual. But hey, I like Freud blades and I want a Freud blade in my track saw. Thank you very much. Now, I understand a 500 quid track saw to trim a door is probably a bit overkill. I've used it because it's the easiest tool for the job and produces a really nice finish. But track saws have come down in price a lot over the years, and as long as you've got a decent blade in the saw, they're all much of a muchness. They cut in a straight line. There's really not a lot to go wrong with them. But having said that, if you don't have a track saw, of course you can just use a handsaw to trim a door. It'll work perfectly well. Obviously, you still need to take the door off its hinges, and a handsaw isn't really much use if you're just taking a tiny little sliver off the bottom of a door. But as long as you're taking more than probably 5, maybe 10 mil off a door, a handsaw should work pretty well. Again, test, test, test. What you can do is just a little score with a Stanley knife to score any paint or veneer on the door, and that should help to stop any chipping. Another option is a bog standard circular saw using a straight edge clamped to the door. Again, try to use a blade with a high tooth count on it just to get a nice clean cut, and you can always do multiple passes at different depths. As per usual, just try to do test cuts if you can until you're used to how the saw and the blade's going to perform. Of course, another option is an electric plane, and again you can pick these up quite cheaply, and this isn't a particularly good one, but oh dear, what's happened to the blade on that? You do have to be a little bit careful with these because the blade is obviously rotating kind of that way. Watch your fingers, the blades are very, very sharp, and what you can get is blowout on the edges of the door where, because of the direction that the plane blade is rotating, when it gets to the unsupported edge of the door, it can just kind of make the wood chip away. Really good if you're just taking kind of less than 5 mil off a door where a saw isn't really practical. So you can get good results with a plane with a bit of practice, and of course there's no reason not to use our old friend, a bog standard wood plane as well, such as this. This is a Bailey number 4 that I've got here in desperate need of sharpening, but once they are nice and sharp, they will do a good job of planing a little bit off a door. So this might be something that you've already got in your garage or workshop, and certainly if you've got a nice sharp blade, that will do the job. Another question that I get asked all the time is how much can you actually trim off a door? And the answer is generally check with the manufacturer's instructions for the door. In the UK, there's generally 4 different options for what doors are normally made of. Either it's going to be a solid wood door, generally in older houses. These you can kind of get away with trimming as much as you want off within reason, as long as you don't damage the mortise and tenon in the joints. You've got hollow core doors, so those are essentially just cardboard or MDF doors, more or less completely hollow. And those you really are limited on how much you can chop out of them, because sometimes they've only got like an inch or so of timber along the bottom, and if you cut that out, then you're literally just, the bottom's just flapping about in the breeze, and you end up having to glue a new piece of timber further up the door on the inside, and it's a little bit of a fiddle on. So in that situation, just don't trim too much off the door. Maybe try and trim some off the top instead, but that's not always practical. You then also get solid core doors with a real wood veneer, and generally speaking, most doors that you buy brand new these days that look like they're made of real wood are just made of chipboard and have a veneer, a very, very thin veneer of real wood over the outside. And then you also get solid core doors with an MDF veneer, and they're generally designed to be painted. This particular door is essentially made of solid chipboard with a thin finishing layer of MDF around the whole thing. It also has wood beads known as lipping at the edges. You can see the side lipping here, and I've cut this in half so you can see the old bottom of the door here. Now technically you shouldn't remove all of the lipping off the door, and if you do, you should really replace it. On a door like this for a bathroom, it's not a fire door, it's not a particularly structurally critical door, and it's pretty sturdy anyway with it having a solid chipboard core to it. So I'm comfortable taking off more than just the lipping. I've probably invalidated the warranty, but I don't really care. But as long as the base of the door is nice and sanded and it's been primed so moisture can't get in, and there's nothing that's going to get caught on the carpet, then I don't personally view that as being a huge problem. If you don't like the idea of that, then you're going to have to trim a bit more off and attach some extra lipping. But I would imagine no matter what, if you do that, you're invalidating the warranty of the door anyway. Another option that I've seen some joiners do is to apply a thin layer of 2-part filler on the bottom of the door, and that just gives a perfectly smooth finish to it and eliminates any problems of it potentially getting caught on the carpet. But in this situation, I'm absolutely fine with the way that I've done it. If possible, try and trim an amount off the top and bottom so that you're not breaking all the way through the lipping. In this situation, that wasn't possible since the door had already been hung, and to be honest, I didn't think the carpets were going to be that thick. It's particularly important that you don't remove all of the lipping on fire doors, because that can cause some quite serious problems. Talking of fire doors, and if you do have fire doors in your property, you have to be really careful that you don't reduce the fire rating of the doors. That can have all sorts of implications. So if you don't know what you're doing with fire doors, I suggest you get a professional out. You know you have fire doors if there's intumescent seals down the edges of either the door or the door frame, and there might be smoke seals on it as well. Very common in newer 3-story properties and on any doors that lead into a garage. Do not reduce the fire rating of your doors. Hello, fly. When it comes to marking up the frame, you can of course just measure down from the hinge rebate to the top of the carpet. The problem with that approach, and generally that is the easiest way of doing it if you've got level floors, but what this doesn't cater for is whether or not you need to take anything off the other side of the door as well. So using the method that I've shown you is probably the most accurate way of checking both sides of the door if the carpets haven't already been installed. If the carpets have already been installed, I would suggest you just measure down from a known point, such as the bottom of your hinge rebate, and taking it from there. Maybe just doing it in a few increments so you don't take too much off all in one go. Of course, if the door does fit and it just needs a tiny little bit taken off the bottom, Probably the easiest thing to do is just to shut the door and just gently run a pencil over the top of the carpet along the bottom of the door just to get a level line all the way across. Obviously, just make sure you've got a nice clean pencil. That's one of the reasons I like the Gosforth Handyman pencils, because they're not painted, it's just got a natural wood finish. And also the leads in them are quite soft leads, so they mark very, very easily. They mark even in the wet. This one's well used, but you can get these on the Gosforth Handyman shop and you can try them out for yourself, along with my favourite normal pencils as well, which are also unpainted deliberately for when you're doing scribes and things and you don't want to mark the wall. So folks, I've probably forgotten to mention loads of stuff to do with trimming doors. Please just pop it down in the comments below, or pop your kind of favourite method of trimming doors down in the comments below as well, because it's always interesting to hear other people's approaches to common jobs like this, and we all learn off each other in this community. And what happened to my old workshop? Well, video coming all about the new workshop very, very soon. So don't forget to subscribe and watch this space, and we will keep you updated on all of that. In the meantime, as per usual, please look after one another, be nice to each other, and we shall see you next time. Tatty bye!